Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Omnia Performance Podcast with me, Fergus, and
me. We're going with wee Johnny Payne now, aren't we?
I just gave my first name.
Well,
Always trying to one-up everybody, aren't you?
Formal. I just have some manners. Just respect the institution of podcasting.
Manners maketh man. And your manners would be missing if you weren't to, at this point, subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, share this episode and an episode previously with a friend, and anything else that's podcast-related would be appreciated. Thank you. Today is all about Zone 2 and the benefits of. Jonny is going to talk us through the, essentially, physiological benefits of Zone 2. It's a popular term online on the interwebs, and we'll just break down in simple terms why it's very important, essential, and in fact paramount to performance. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion on the mental benefits and how it's benefited us both personally. Other than that, check out the website. Make sure to sign up to the mailing list down below. You can, in fact, get 5 of our favourite books to read that we have read recently as a recommendation via the link down below. So check that out, and they will be delivered straight to your inbox once you have done that. And you can then enjoy those in your own time. So let's begin.
And begin we shall. I've got some notes in front of me, so if anybody watching sees me looking down, it's because I'm old and I have no personal recall. I didn't recall my own name properly at the beginning of this. Actually, you didn't recall your name because you didn't have a surname. Don't
drag me. I just chose to not refer to myself in my government name. I just chose my Gover name to get it. To get that.
It's vague.
It's terrible. Yeah. Anyway.
I guess probably what we should do before we really kick off and kind of look at benefits and whatnot is establish what we are saying Zone 2 is. What is Zone 2? And the best way to do that is to consider...
It's the zone between Zone 1 and 3.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. Because zonage, breaking down of zones, is essentially an overarching kind of mechanism that has been adopted by mostly by endurance coaches and those working within that world to then separate out different kind of percentages of your heart rate max, or we actually work from your threshold average or your threshold potential. So what we're doing is we're looking at the kind of the overall maximum heart rate, and I guess if we consider it as ridiculous as the minimum heart rate, which is zero to dead at one end, dead at the other, and how do we break down all the kind of energy systems and what's happening when you move and exercise and expend energy, and where the different kind of inflection points are within that. And really, for argument's sake, Dr. Phil speaks of this well, and we've done it on previous podcasts. You could argue that there are actually 3 inflection points. There's kind of aerobic, and then we're going to kind of tip over, and it is a spectrum, and it moves and changes for everybody. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit. Aerobic into kind of this midpoint, this lactate build up, this glycotic midpoint, and then at the top end we're fully anaerobic. So these different inflection points represent different energy systems, the way that your body uses substrates.
Which in simple terms, as Dr. Phil has referred to in the past, is kind of existence, VT1 and VT2. Which is essentially ventilatory threshold.
That's right. And Zone 2 is anything under, if you like, that ventilatory threshold of 1, which we refer to a lot in our program actually now, which is VT1. And anything beyond VT1 into VT2 is another inflection point, and beyond that you're in kind of a different area altogether. So all zones are doing is kind of breaking down that kind of percentage point. We use a 5-zone system at Omnia. It suits our purposes and allows us to kind of illustrate what we want individuals to do within that programming. Zone 2 represents a kind of a purely aerobic zone, and I guess that's the easiest way to frame it. Like I say, there are different zone. I think Maffetone uses a different zone to us. I think this one, that one, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're just sort of demonstrating bite points within
every system is trying to elicit the same response, but by different ways of getting there.
Yeah, and people use their Garmin's or my zone and things, and have different things: green zone, red zone, etc. And it's the same principle, and it's an intelligent principle, and it's one that we go by. But
one system, Zone 2, Maffetone Zone 2. Max heart rate Zone 2 and LTHR Zone 2, will probably all be slightly different. We've had people often ask us questions saying, oh, my Garmin for ages has said that this is my zone 2, whereas as a result of my LTHR test, it's come out as this. More often than not, people are actually just going off generalized Garmin prescriptions rather than specific ones. LTHR probably, generally speaking, in conditioned athletes, not to like a high level, but those that are used to training regularly, means that their zone 2 will probably be a little bit higher. It'll definitely be higher than with Maffetone. It'll be a bit higher than with max heart rate, generally speaking, which might mean that for some it's a little bit higher as a general rule. But again, all we're trying to do is elicit the same response and become more efficient in each zone.
Yeah, and so they're just working as guidelines. It's as simple as that. And so for the benefit of the podcast and for the benefit, I guess this is the overarching understanding of it, is that zone 2 is a zone within that whole spectrum where we can maintain and prescribe people's ability to stay almost entirely aerobic. I'd say almost. Aerobic is the point. And it's not, you mentioned a minute ago, Phil's inflection between existence and work being that kind of midpoint. Before you get to VT1, there's a point under which we would probably call zone 1, where you're just milling about doing not very little. And you're not going to really elicit the benefits of aerobic exercise when you're just kicking about doing. So taking the dogs for a walk, whilst it might maintain health, isn't going to produce enough adaptions to produce a kind of a positive adaptation.
But it will elevate your heart rate a bit, which means that there's a TDEE response.
Yeah.
And it doesn't invalidate it as exercise, because I have seen, I think it was Ed Milet, the big podcaster in the US, who was kind of bashing that a little bit.
Oh no, well, that's stupid. I mean, it's just stupid in logical terms. I mean, why would you bash that? Let's all go for
so he could get lots of engagement for his podcast, probably.
Point well made.
Yeah. You idiot.
Yeah. Okay.
And also because he is a bit of a bro that seems to think that it's a bit Goggins-esque mentality. So it means that walking's for pussies, man. But also it gets you places. It allows the dogs to keep happy, and it's a great way of upping your energy expenditure.
Yeah.
So
and it is
call me a pussy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm quite happy to be a pussy if that's the description. So. The main benefits we'll run through. We've got a kind of a short list here, and as I said, I'll refer to notes to make sure I don't kind of lose some in my very untidy mind. But the overall benefit,
tangent avoidance is what these notes are. Just to clarify, Jonny has notes so he can be concise, which you'll all be pleased to hear.
Yeah, that's accurate. I was trying to kind of preserve my dignity a little bit, but thanks for
that. Not today.
So the main physiological benefit, or the one that we're going to kind of tap in on as being our kind of bedrock for this, is that it increases aerobic work. Zone 2 work will increase the number and the efficiency of mitochondria in your body. Mitochondria, for anybody who doesn't know, in a very, very simple layman's terms.
Hang on. Let me please. GCSE biology has literally led me to this moment.
Are you going to say it?
No. This is fresh. I'm younger than you, Jonny.
Please do it.
This is more fresh in my mind. It is the powerhouse of the cell.
Please read whatever in here. In quotation marks.
Oh my God! There we go. I've used an actual bit of information from school in a real life setting. Good Lord!
In quotation marks, because anytime anybody describes,
I wonder when we'll get to use algebra.
Anytime anybody describes mitochondria, they are guaranteed to say it is the powerhouse of the cell. Within the cell, we're looking for two. For energy turnover, we're looking to oxidize the food that's coming in through phosphorylation, and that process itself happens in the mitochondria where ATP is produced. And ATP is the main kind of turnover point, or the main energy source that we use. Within a kind of a chemical breakdown process. The more mitochondria we have, the more efficient that mitochondria is, the more energy we can produce, and the more repeatability of that energy can be used. So this is why it is the powerhouse of the cell, because that's where this kind of aerobic respiration is happening, and that's where that kind of turnover of that energy happens. And you kind of think of that as the embers in the fire. This is something that we're allowing. So the bigger the fire, the bigger the engine. There are obvious kind of ways to expand on that analogy, but that's what we're looking at through aerobic adaptation. As you go up those inflection points, the opportunity to aerobically adapt and the opportunity to develop more mitochondria is lessened, because you're looking at lots of different kind of chemical breakdowns and buffers and things that get in the way of that. And you're now moving from that kind of opportunity to grow that and to adapt that process into fuel utilization and these different kind of processes that stop that. So, we could get into that a little bit, but it's probably for a different podcast. But ultimately, the more intense the work, the less the opportunity is to adapt and develop that mitochondria. So that's where we're starting from. And the benefits of that are relatively obvious. I think the larger you can build that energy, that engine, the larger the engine, the greater the capacity for work. Okay.
Excellent.
So again, let's contextualize that in our world. Then the obvious benefit from that, drawing straight on from that point, is it's going to improve your capacity as an endurance athlete, and ultimately, people that are working in a hybrid environment, that's something that they're very, very keen to do. The long and short of it is the larger the engine, the longer you can go, and ultimately, actually, the faster you can go, because the more aerobically adapted you are, the further away you are from that, or the longer you can sustain that process, that you're kind of pushing that buffer, that inflection point, that VT1 point further and further away. You can operate more efficiently within that area, and in doing so, therefore, you can increase efficiency, and you can increase speed, and you can increase all these different elements that add to a greater endurance athlete. So from an endurance perspective, there's probably no greater place to be, which is why these 80-20 rules become paramount, really, because you don't want to spend too much time the other way round, or you won't get that aerobic adaptation, which is fundamental.
Important thing is, for most people, up until we're starting to get in the sort of 2:15 and below marathon level, the efficiency is relative to speed, whereby somebody running a 4-hour 10 marathon versus somebody running a 2:30 marathon is a fair reflection of that person's efficiency within that sort of pacing zone to some degree. Obviously, there's some levels of speed and efficiency and development where somebody can probably sit at a much higher heart rate relative to their zones than somebody else might be, but that's just conditioning. But I think the important thing to flag is that once you hit a certain level of conditioning and fitness, somebody running a 2:30 marathon versus you running a 3:45 marathon, let's say, is the same relative output and demand individual to individual. One person is just effectively utilizing their physiology at the same level, but they're just more efficient. It's just more mitochondrial density, which means that all of the things that are built up, and it means that their pace before they hit VT2 and therefore start to be able to tail off in terms of pacing and sustainability is higher. It's just a relative ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, just think of it in terms of engine size. If you've got a 2-litre engine and you're trying to drive at X amount, 90 mile an hour down the road, you're gonna get that 90 mile an hour, but you can see the RPMs. You're 3,000 revs and above, and the whole thing's screaming at you, and you can see the fuel deplete in the car.
Whereas if you're in a naturally aspirated V12, then you've got a long way to go.
Yeah, you're doing the same speed, and
that is Kipchoge in this case.
You're 1,500 revs, and the fuel's just not going down very fast. It's a really simple analogy. It's not. You could pick that to pieces very quickly, but ultimately that's what it does.
The reason I flag that is to encourage people that the relative, as efficiency increases, these zones increase up the way in terms of if your aerobic pace used to be 6 minutes per K and your efficiency increases, the sort of ceiling increases. So the pace goes up in line with it as you develop yourself. And I just wanted to flag that because I think it's important for people to realize that you work as hard as you can relatively, and these zones are a reflection of your ability, which means that if 4:45 is your threshold pace and somebody else's threshold pace is 3:45, they're not better than you inherently.
No, exactly.
You're working at the same output. What matters is the work being done to make the improvements. And I guess to always hark back to it, the individual goals and why people are wanting to improve those things.
Yeah. And it's, I was going to say infinitely, that would be promising more than is real, but it's you can continue to improve this for a long, long time. There are almost, we're touching on different points here. This is me, what was I supposed to be staying static to my notes? But if we look at the overall ability to work, and we look at adding more and more zone 2 into a week, as long as we add it within a sensible protocol, and we don't sort of smash people by doing hundreds and hundreds of hours all of a sudden, the feedback mechanism is it's not particularly taxing. And we could look at the example of a runner. We've discussed this many times. You could be doing X amount of running, but but still supplementing that aerobic capacity build by doing a little bit on the bike. This is what I do, obviously, during the week, is my list work will be done 50% of it on the bike. So over the course of a week, I'm doing upwards of 180 minutes just at a base level of lists, and maybe only 100 of that is actually the sport-specific work. But I'm still, exponentially increasing my my aerobic capacity by just simply working my aerobic system. Another point that you can probably dig into here is that and kind of links into the same thing, is that we're looking at improving work capacity. So if we look across at the other side of the spectrum from a hybrid perspective and look at a strength athlete, even a strength athlete who doesn't have a particular will to do much more than use quote unquote endurance work to increase health benefits, maybe doesn't have a particular aerobic goal, the benefits are huge. You've experienced this yourself in many different formats, but anybody who's strength training, who adds a little bit of zone 2 work, which isn't going to interfere fatigue-wise with the overall recovery, is going to find that their work capacity goes up simply because they are allowing their volume to increase by allowing their recovery potential to increase by increasing that capacity for demand. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, and I felt it tangibly. I mean, it's how I discovered zone 2 stuff, and my efficiency from there developed, whereby we were doing zone 2 stuff to make my ability to sustain squatting weight over a long period of time more sustainable.
Well, that's essentially how we first met, isn't it?
Yeah.
How can you do this for longer? Well, you have to be more aerobically tuned.
And yeah, a lot of that work came on the bike, a lot of it came on my feet, and it just meant that as my aerobic capacity developed, which was kind of a low-hanging fruit after years of being a chunky powerlifter, yeah, I felt my ability to sustain rep work was much, much higher, and I was put much less on my arse by rep work than I would have been previously.
Yep. You can also, hard to explain this, let me try and frame this, is if you look at the VO2 max of an individual, let's say a sort of a supremely muscled individual, so we're looking at the strength bias of that, you would think that the more lean muscle an individual had, the more likely their VO2 max would be higher because you're looking at a more
utilization. Yeah,
essentially. Certainly, on first glance, you'd think this is a more highly tuned athlete. Sometimes, or more often than not, unless that zone 2 work's been done, unless the aerobic underpinning's been done, that athlete has a reduced capacity for VO2 max. And it's because the oxygen utilization in their body isn't actually peripherally getting there. There's no peripheral network in the capillary network into the muscles themselves. So if you grew through kind of Harry Potter magic trick, now you grew an extra 3-4 kilos of muscle in a physiological way, you're not necessarily feeding that with the appropriate capacity for blood flow, and blood flow therefore equals oxygen flow and nutrients to the muscles, etc., etc. So the more densely muscled you are, and the less aerobically capable those muscles are, simply because of that lack of aerobic underpinning, you're actually reducing your overall capacity to work.
Yeah, it's like how much pressure do you let run through the tap into the bucket? As the bucket gets bigger, i.e. you get more jacked and dense, then the tap needs to flow at an equally
you need to feed
increasing pace. And if you get really, really jacked over a long period of time without aerobically stimulating your system, then even if you make it onto the cover of a men's fitness magazine, you probably won't be all that quote unquote fit.
Yep.
Which is a perception to challenge, because I think I saw somebody, he was a young guy, but he was sitting in his car and saying, is it just me or is the fitness industry, quote unquote, and then gave a very, very bodybuilding specific thing that I had no concept of. And that's not a bad thing. Essentially, his focus is bodybuilding. That's absolutely fine. But the fitness industry also includes triathletes and recreational marathon runners. It's a very wide spectrum.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing from that bodybuilder's perspective is, and that really kind of helps elucidate, doesn't it, is if we were to speak to that individual or an individual like him and say, okay, you want to maintain your ability to be super jacked, you want to maintain your ability to continue that journey, my prescription is a little bit more aerobic work. They're going to go, oh my God, up yours, mate, and you fucking absolute idiot, and walk off. And that's the paradigm from which they're working. But physiologically and looking at it academically, that's the wrong side of the mirror he's looking through. Is if we actually added enough aerobic capacity to help those that nutrient flow, that overall oxygenation of those muscles, his recovery potential is higher. The blood flow to those muscles is better, so there's better nutrient turnaround and therefore better recovery. And therefore his capacity to grow muscle is actually increased, as is all these underlying health markers. So we've increased we've facilitated his goal much better than previous, because he can recover for the volume and therefore do more work as well. But we've also said your potential to live longer here is vast. So there are no negatives, despite the paradigm he's describing. There are no negatives whatsoever to saying, get a little bit quote unquote fitter. But there are very, very many negatives to saying, no, that doesn't work for me because it speaks against my bodybuilding, because that's sort of factually wrong. But logically, when you look at it from that perspective, you can understand why there's the pushback, which we've discussed many times, as interference effect. This is going to affect my capacity to do this, that, and the next thing. I haven't got that much recovery time, blah, blah, blah. All makes sense, but the dose is the poison, isn't it? If we suddenly got that same guy out running a marathon, his bodybuilding will immediately suffer, and so will his recovery, so will his joints, etc., etc. But that's not the prescription we're talking about. It's simply, what are the benefits of Zone 2? Well, for everybody, there are some.
That's the reason I brought it up as an example, because traditionally, up until, it's nothing like this now, but there's still elements of it. But for many years, the fitness cover, the epitomes of the fitness industry were just people that were really lean and jacked. And essentially,
the fact that Ronnie Coleman was doing upwards of 180 minutes of treadmill walking every week,
upwards of 180 milliliters of other things. But I think it's
bad example.
Yeah,
but still doing this cardio.
Yeah,
my point.
Yeah. But it's a case of the benefits we're talking about today. It's important for those to be the foundation of everything. It doesn't need to be a performance-driven outcome. But I think the tendency that we have to associate, quote unquote, the fitness industry with simply being lean and jacked misses the value and the point of, I think, what a lot of people extract from it, which in simple terms can be what we're discussing today from a purely health, physiological and self-improvement point of view. Yeah.
And sometimes lean and jacked can equal less fit. Like as a direct.
The one time I've got really, really lean and made it my sole focus, I was miserable. I restricted movement. I restricted my social life. I restricted a lot of things. Did I have to do that? No, but it was just the mindset that forced me down. I'm not saying that's a generalized thing, but for me personally, the least happy and fit I have ever been is when I was purely in the pursuit of leanness. Yeah. Exactly. If you look,
dichotomy, that isn't it, or juxtaposition. Paradox is the word I was actually looking for, but we tried 3. Next point on here, which we kind of touched on a little bit in terms of actually kind of this capillary network, is just the overall health. Your bodybuilder we're talking about just there, the overall health improvement, the overall capacity for that health improvement is vast. I'm not sure it even needs little tick boxes here, but clearly developing a better overall aerobic base and working on your cardiovascular fitness, your overall heart fitness, as opposed to just this, with weight training, we're just looking at this left ventricular hypertrophy. So we're looking at the kind of the body of the muscle building up. We're actually looking for all the benefits of a good working heart, which is essentially the efficiency of the heart. Means it doesn't have to work as hard, which means it can work hard. Got twisted there, but you know what I'm trying to say.
You were going to say it's good, so you can work harder, weren't you?
Yeah, that's
so the heart can work harder.
Yeah. But ultimately, the more efficient it is, the less pressure it's under, which is great for everybody. And then, as I said, in a purely kind of performance-related way, that muscle nutrient efficiency is useful, but that's also great for health because you're going to deliver those nutrients to the muscle, and then the body's in a better state. So, again, we're looking at it more or less through a performance lens here for the sake of this podcast, but because it would probably be another hour if we were to sit and list the health benefits, reduced blood pressure, staving off the diabetes, all these kind of things. They're innumerable. And then,
easy Google search as well for anyone that's interested. If anyone does want to just look up what the physiological baseline health benefits are for zone 2. It's all widely reported.
I don't think it's much of a sell to say moving a little bit more, working a little bit harder is going to make you healthier than sitting on your arse eating Doritos. So let's just say zone 2 works the best way to go about that, just from a purely health benefit perspective. And then the last one, which you can touch on really from a personal perspective, is that physiologically there's a lot going on there that adds to it, but you have personal experience, as do I, but let's lean into your experience about the simple mousse. About mousse. Let's talk about mousse.
Chocolate is my favourite. I had a tiramisu one recently as well.
The Canadian mousse.
Oh, yeah. As I'm saying, I had a chocolate one recently, and it's blended down, and then no, it's getting weird. Never mind.
Mood boosting qualities. I tried to say it mood and boosting.
Not mousse boosting.
Which is why I got mousse.
Yeah.
Mood boosting qualities. What does it do psychologically for you?
Undistracted time within an otherwise very distracted week. It's the modern world. We'll have devices nearby. We'll have people chasing us for things. We'll have messages and notifications pinging. So I generally do all of my aerobic stuff without my phone, or if I'm doing something long and actually it's safe and sensible to have access to a phone, then it'll be in my trail bag out of reach. I'm not going to be sort of checking it as I go, which means that my mind is free for the first, which means that my mind is free for a allocated slot of time within the week, which is very valuable. The downstream benefits of that are, from a sort of basic neurological point of view, endorphins come from that, which means that you feel good for doing it. I think that's a lot of why recreational running is becoming more and more popular. But I think the reflection and unpacking time is very, very useful because it allows you to take action on the things that you've considered. I habitually go out on long runs, long rides, whatever it is, long swims especially, because you're staring at pool tiles or darkness going, what am I thinking about? So if you go in unprepared, then it's going to be a little bit less useful. So I go in with a selection list of things to think about. I try and unpack them, and then I've got a notebook at my front door that I tend to scribble on when I come in, and then kind of process that. And all of the big business, personal life decisions that I've made in the past 4 years of the seed has been planted or the decision has been made somewhere on that spectrum whilst out doing aerobic stuff. And for me, that's something that I missed when I've potentially not been as mentally healthy in the past. When, for example, last summer when I was more strongman and track focused, the reduction in zone 2 volume that I had week to week was definitely something that I felt hindered me, not physically, but mentally.
Yeah.
And the feeling of achievement, because zone 2 allows you to cover bigger distances, it allows you to do longer times, and it's quite hilarious as a previously chonky powerlifter, as I've already referred to myself as, where running for the bus would have put me on my arse.
Yeah.
So thinking, I've just 5 hours running in Training Peaks, best pack my bags. I'm kind of used to that now, but the reflection that's come from that is my body can move me for 5 hours without much hassle. I can cover X amount of distance without much hassle. How cool is that? And I think that's where the delayed gratification of zone 2 stuff really comes, because not only are you giving yourself processing time mentally, but you're giving yourself physiological processing time where the progress won't reveal itself day to day. You can't look in the mirror and sort of flex your zone 2. I mean, if you had a big hole in your chest, you probably could, but you'd be in trouble. I think the main thing is your work capacity, your general feeling day to day, your mental clarity, and your ability to maintain work over a sustained period of time all increases. And then you can take on more training, you can take on more fun stuff here and there. You can play a game of paddle or a game of five-a-side and be the most obnoxiously fit person there just by virtue of having that baseline. And it means that you are ready to dip your toe into whatever gets thrown at you.
The most is in soft play. When I take the boys to soft play, which they love, which is
you and your just your friends or your children?
Me and the lads.
You mean the lads? Yeah, a couple of pints and soft play.
Right, lads, let's go. My children, my boys, take them to soft play. I'll jump in and play with them, and we run and we jump, and it's like a little obstacle. Everything's too small for me as well, which makes it harder. It's like playing an obstacle course. And the children have boundless energy, so we're looking at usually you buy your ticket and you get 90 minutes, 60 minutes or 90 minutes, and these boys always want the 90 minutes. And I play with them for the 90 minutes the whole time, and I watch other dads, other mums come in and either stand at the bottom, and they're fair. Some of them maybe just want the time on their own. I'm not really picking on people, but when I see people actually actively try and engage, they've got 5 minutes in them. And then they have to sit down. You see them puffing and panting, out of breath, etc. They maybe come in for another 5 minutes later on. So over that 90 minutes, and I see there's a lot. They've done 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and maybe spent 15 minutes running with the kids. And that's fine. That's not, but on a purely fitness, observing fitness, I'm in there for the 90 minutes moving around. The time I play with my kids has been given back to me by the time I might have spent out doing X amount of time on the trails. So it's a cyclical energy return on that front. And it speaks to your point as well, the running for the bus thing. The more time you can give people, the fitter you are. The benefits, barring the scientific underpinning, are innumerable and ever giving. So get out and do your zone too.
The analogy that we touched upon earlier is the best one, really, where if you're in it's the rev limiter. It's if you're in a little dinger, let's go with what's the most universal? A Nissan Altima. I feel like that's the most universally applicable to our American and UK and Australian listeners. A Nissan Altima, probably if you're going 70 miles an hour or 120 kilometers an hour for other parts of the world, you're going to be sitting at 3.5, 4, maybe 4,500 revs. It's going to be high and you're going to be working hard, which means that if that engine spends a lot of time there, it's probably wearing its lifespan down. Yeah. I'm not going to let anyone in the comments go, well, it's Japanese, so actually the engine will probably... Okay, that's not what the point is here. Not the car, the rev limiter. And then if you go to the other end of the spectrum and you've got a Bugatti W16 engine, you can probably be at 70 miles an hour at 2,200 revs, which means you can just... It's not working hard whilst moving at the same pace. Which means it can stay there for much, much longer, which is like you with the kids. It's kind of
I'm a limousine built for the Autobahn now.
How long have you been thinking on that? Is that something you've been repressing? And this is the opportunity? A limousine sitting on the Autobahn?
Yeah.
What car brand are you? How would you just... How do you... You're a Maybach?
Yeah.
Okay. Modified?
I mean, look at me, Fergus.
Modified?
Yeah, we've got all the sort of comforts and things in there. There's things that we don't need, but that we want.
Okay. And how do the tattoos manifest into this Maybach? Is that the mods or just the general presence?
That's mods. Yeah.
Okay.
Personalized it a little bit, customized it, I suppose we could say.
Okay. Interesting. I've learned a lot about you here, Johnny. I think we've all learned a lot about you. But anyway, yeah, the rev limit is the example. Is Zone 2 allows you to move at the same pace, whatever that pace may be for whatever is required, whatever the task is, with a lower stress on the mechanism at play. Using an engine as an analogy,
so do you are the engine. To be revving your Nissan Altima at 7,000 revs and hoping for the best, and maybe it won't even make the journey, or do you want to relax in your customized Maybach? Ask yourself that question and then consider your Zone 2 priorities. Can't summarize this episode any better than that, can we?
No.
We can say, though, that if you want to know more, you want to know about how to set your Zone 2, where to place that within a progressive hybrid program, come see Omnia Performance. Visit the website, have a chat, leave something in the comments, do all the things. Not like me to do this, is it, Fergus? You're looking at me thinking, man,
I'm very tired. I'm glad you're doing this.
Summarizing.
Thank you. Yes.
Do all those things. Come see us. Because, we're always at pains to say that Fergus is not Johnny, is not Jamie, is not you. We're all separate people. We all have certain starting points, different side engines. I am a Maybach, as we've established. Fergus sees himself as an Altima. That's something he needs to work on. And if we are those separate things, then the application of Zone 2 is different for everybody. So we're here to help. And we love talking about this stuff, and we love facilitating your journey down the Autobahn.
And there's nothing wrong with the Nissan Altima if anyone drives one.
That's fair.
I just chose that
if you own a Nissan Altima, please don't come.
I just chose that as what I believe is a fairly available worldwide and quite low-engined car. Yes. And very reliable, as it's Japanese, just to please
the Japanese.
Whoever's listening that felt the need to go, oh, well, actually, if you look at the average lifespan of a... Yeah, okay. Thanks. Cheers, mate. Cheers.
Zone 2.
Anyway, Zone 2. The end.